I'm going to pass everybody one of these so that if you have another cool idea you would like to share. There's two more. And here's a third just in case.
Thank you. You're so generous.
Write something cool down if you think of something awesome. You guys aren't parents, but that's okay. Because you can think of a hack for parents.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
There you go. And write something awesome on there. And then I wanted to let y'all know that I have a little QR code here for Parent Zone newsletter, emails, information. Those come about once a month, so if you aren't on that, I'd love to get you on that. And then I can give you one of these afterwards. So thank you so much for coming. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're glad you're here. Welcome back. Most of you are back for week 2, and then a lot of you are online watching as well. So thank you very much. I'm glad you want to make a difference in the lives of kids when it comes to technology. So to start off, I figured I would introduce myself and just give a bit of background. I'm Ben Hammock. I'm a children's pastor here at UCC. I'm a graduate of Manhattan Christian College, and I've been doing youth/kids ministry as a career since 2015. I have an amazing wife, and her name's Allie, and I have an amazing son named Theo. And Andrew can probably tell by my script that I was about to say this, but he's helping me pray that Theo is at 6'7", like minimum height. We're hoping for 7 feet, but we will settle for 6'7". I'd settle. I'm about 6'4". I'd settle, for 6'4" as well, but it is what it is. So I'm very excited about being a parent as well. So now I'm kind of in the same boat as y'all, although he's the only guy right now. So we're, even if he's the only kid, I'm still gonna have. I've got a few years before this stuff becomes extremely prevalent in my life. So hopefully I can put it into practice as well. But first things first, let's pray, and then we'll get started. Dear God, I just thank you for these parents here and the parents watching online. Lord, I just pray that you would just use me, speak through me to just give one or two things. Lord, my prayer is just that these parents can walk away with one or two things that are going to help them set better boundaries, safer things, be able to protect their kids from what is out there, but also just to equip them with conversation with their kids so that they can connect with their kids, build that relationship with their kids, and ultimately their kids will be able to trust what they decide is best for them. Lord, help us to just reflect you. Help us to live lives that glorify you and lead by example for our kids. And in Jesus' name I pray, amen. All right, so there's the analogy of the knife as technology as a knife. And Andrew touched a little bit on this last week, about how smartphone or any internet technology is kind of like a knife. It's neither inherently evil or good, but a knife can be used for productive things like cutting bread or spreading butter. I love to put butter on like anything that has bread on it. Whittling is productive, right? You can make a tool, but it can also be used for super horrible things like murder or stabbing somebody, okay? So let's carry out the analogy a little further. Different knives, different things. But some knives, although they can serve a purpose, could also do major damage. And then there's this knife that, how could you even find a positive use for this knife right here? Kind of hard to find a positive. Are you going to put some butter on your bread with that knife? Probably not, right? So some knives are okay. Some knives, I probably wouldn't give this to a 14-year-old. And maybe that's how you feel about a phone too. So there is a correlation here to the world of technology and our students, especially in the world of social media and apps. There's a ton of options out there, which we'll get to, and they vary in their intended purpose. So some pose no to little risk at all in their usage, and others, or really most, could be used in a healthy manner, but contain several opportunities to inflict spiritual, emotional damage, all kinds of damage on their users and others as well. And then there are a few out there that I really don't think you could find any redemptive value in whatsoever. And you probably already agree with me on those, and so it is what it is. So the key is just kind of figuring out how to know which is which and which things are good. And then there's two common questions that I want to hit here when it comes to talking to parents about technology. I'm often most approached with two questions. And the first one is, what is out there that we need to know? And what types of filters or controls are available? And I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that we're going to spend the rest of our time talking through these two questions. However, I don't know that I will be able to give you all the answers you hope to receive. And if I did, that would be too much information and you wouldn't be able to apply it all anyway. So really, my hope for you today is to be able to take one or two things that are super applicable that you could use for your family, or you could pass on to another parent or another person who is mentoring teens or whatever it may be. And so really, don't feel like you have to do all of this. Everything is, kind of a case-by-case basis. You got to figure out what works for you. So to that first question, what is out there? Really, it's an impossible task. I have a feeling most of you maybe came into this class, hoping that you can figure out exactly what's going on and exactly what to tell your kids, but that's really not the case. Mainly because, as an example to illustrate this, at the end of 2017, the Apple App Store alone, which was called iTunes back then, most of you remember that probably, it had 3.5 million apps available, and they were adding an average of 1,000 apps every day. And it's got to be more now. I mean, there's a new version of Candy Crush every day. There's a new version of Temple Run every single day almost. So really, everything is changing overnight, and we're not going to be able to cover everything, but that's okay. I think hopefully this will still be really helpful. And I am by no means an expert. I think Andrew probably said that in his talk last week. Brian will probably say the same thing, as well as Josh. A lot of this research we're adapting comes from a guy that we really respect, and I think he created this around 2017. So we've updated it quite a bit just for us to use. And if we, instead of covering absolutely everything, I kind of want to step back from the trees and look at the forest, if that makes sense. So instead of getting into every single thing, here's this app, here's what we do, here's this app, here's what we do, we want to just look at all of it real quick, and then hopefully we can get an overview that's going to be helpful for anything that we do zoom in on. So there's going to be 4 things to know. This is kind of the thing that we're going to go through for the rest of the talk here, and each of these things to know, we're going to zoom in on just a little bit. And really, I brought this book. I wanted to illustrate just kind of the point of how outdated some things are in as quick as a day. But this is a book on MySpace. You guys remember MySpace? Show of hands, MySpace? We remember MySpace. Okay, so in 2004, I believe I had a MySpace as like an 8th grader. And it was already, you either knew about it or you didn't in 2004. This book was published, I already forgot what year, 2007. So as soon as this book hit the shelves, it was outdated. We already should have known most of this stuff. So I just wanted that to be an analogy of how quickly things go. So that's what we're dealing with. And I think that's okay, because as quickly as things update, we're able to get updated on the updates very quickly as well. And I think as Christians and people who are looking to make a difference in the lives of kids and teenagers, it's very important that we take that seriously and that we are relevant enough to know what's going on so that we can best disciple our kids. Okay, so the first question, things to know, the first thing of things to know the social media platforms. Andrew went through some apps and everything last week, and we're going to do that a little bit again here. So when talking about technology, we just want to understand what we're talking about with the phrase social media. So the Webster definition of social media is forms of blank. I'm going to let you guys guess this. Forms of blank, such as websites for social networking and microblogging. I don't know if that's still a thing, through which users create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content such as videos. So electronic what? What are we doing electronically here? Relationships, very close to that. The word actually that they use is communication. So electronic communication, the social aspect of it. So which leads to relationships, building relationships, keeping up with people, communicating, all that stuff. So the social media is the digital playground where our kids are living, playing, suffering, and building up their identity. So you need to know the platforms and how they work. And really great analogy that Andrew used was that social media, you can treat that like a place. There's certain places you wouldn't want your kids to go without first knowing certain things, and there's certain places that you wouldn't want your kids to go at all, and hopefully even as an adult wouldn't go as well. And so you can really treat social media like that as well. Any kind of app, you can treat that as a place. Any website, a place, or even the internet in general, a place. So I'd like to walk through what I believe, and I've talked to some of our other guys, are the most popular social media apps that students are using right now. Tied for first, three-way tie for first here: TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat. I think we've all probably heard of those. Would you agree that these are probably the most popular ones? Most likely. So that's what we went with there. And then there is YouTube. And a lot of people don't think of YouTube as a social networking site, but it definitely is. And most of our students use it as a spot to watch content, but several have their own channels where they can post videos of themselves talking gaming, stuff like that. YouTube has its own set of celebrities, influencers, or YouTubers who are super popular, as y'all know. And sadly, I am no longer one of them. After COVID kind of went by, I'm no longer a YouTuber, which, it came and went. I don't really want to be a YouTuber. It was actually really hard. So, and the thing about YouTube, there's a comment feature. So you know what that means. Anyone can say whatever they want. I think people are a lot better at blocking people now who say crazy things or, link horrible things into the comments. They're a lot better at getting blocked now than they were even just 3, 4, 5 years ago. But that is a thing. And then very, very, very far back, the little tiny one there is Twitter. Most of you know about Twitter. It's been around longer than most of these other ones. I think YouTube's actually older, but Twitter is typically really toxic, even if you're not following things that are unhealthy or people arguing back and forth, or it's just like a playground of people who want to say bad things is kind of what Twitter is. And then you've all heard of Facebook, and your kids are probably not using it, right? Because most of us in here are using it. So again, I would encourage, just as a bare minimum, for you to be aware of what the platforms are, what your kids are using, and just become students of those and what they can do. And now I'm going to give you a quick pop quiz, and this is not the most fun pop quiz I've ever given, but which of these apps can actually host harmful content? And since Bradley's got her headphones on, I'm going to say we're talking about pornography. Which one of these, does anyone know? There's 2 of these that you can just straight up find harmful content, on these. So would anyone like to take a guess as to which? And one of them is kind of a gray area because the company themselves aren't putting it out or hosting it necessarily on purpose. But I have no hands showing, so I'm going to...
Well, I know Snapchat is one.
Yes, Snapchat people can generate their own pornographic content on Snapchat, which most of is probably, it could be underage. But I want to say that there is people on Snapchat that you can follow that are just going to post pornographic content they're a user that just posts that. So that's pretty crazy. And then the other one is Twitter. You can just type in something crazy and it's on Twitter. There's probably several accounts to show you pictures or videos or whatever. So that's really important to know because that might influence your decision whether or not to use these platforms or allow your kids to use them as well. And just speaking of pornography, we're going to get a little bit more into that later. And then Brian is going to have an excellent talk next week about what to do if this has already become an issue with your kid or student. So I'm going to hopefully not scare you guys too much with any of that information, but we will touch on it. And then next week is going to be a really awesome supplement to that as well. All right, moving on to the second thing to know, and that is games. So games, even since 2015, have grown a ton. I want to say, we'll talk about Fortnite in a little bit, but when Fortnite came out, it was like kind of a thing that I thought was going to be just a flash in the pan, like, oh, yeah, this is a popular game now, but there's going to be another game in a month that's more popular. And that game has been insane, and it's its own economy. So anyway, as most of you know, as most of you most likely bought a gaming system, there's a lot of gaming happening, and there's a lot of ways that kids are going about it, so I would love for you to know that as much as possible. Most games are a social network in and of themselves. Most of your kids who have game systems, they say, hey, Mom, I just need the headset so I can also chat when I'm playing Fortnite or Call of Duty with my friends or NBA 2K or whatever it is. You can jump online and just play against literally anyone. You can usually choose just my friends are playing in this match, and I can talk to you a little bit more about how to do that later. But the thing is, really, you can talk to like literally anybody. So this doesn't just happen on an Xbox or a PlayStation or a Nintendo Switch. This also could happen on a smartphone. The smartphone games also have this feature, most of them. And then, of course, Fortnite, which is hugely popular. Raise your hand if you don't know a lot of stuff about Fortnite already. I mean, most of us do. That's okay if you don't because your kids aren't that old yet, but you've probably at least heard of it. So it's a third-person shooter, massive multiplayer online game. That's how they would describe it. And you really just run around shooting your friends and building stuff so that they don't shoot you. And so I would love for you to just, any kind of game that your kid is playing, know what's in it. And then here's the 3 things about how to do that. Pay attention to ratings on games. Check out the content. So here's the 3 C's of knowing what to do about games. Games are actually very forthright with the content that is in them. If there is nudity or strong language or sexual themes in a game or heavy violence, like those are going to be right on the back of the game. If you're buying a physical game, a lot of games now you download them. Before you click buy on the interface online, you can look around and find that rating. It's pretty close to the buy button, which is great. So you can see what's in there, and they are, I mean, if it says it's on there, and really it's not going to, they're pretty forthright with what's actually in there. So you're not going to find a bunch of nudity in a game that doesn't say there's nudity or whatever it may be, which is probably the thing you're looking out for the most. I'll share a pretty cool site later that's going to help a lot with how to know what's in what. So we'll get to that later. And then consistency is the second one. Just pay attention to how much they are playing each game. That really goes a long way to know kind of what's popular, what's going on. It'll help you understand like why they're into certain things. And then the third one, connections. So most games being multiplayer, which I mentioned earlier, be aware of who your kids are playing with and what their interactions are like. So even if your kid isn't playing a game that his friend is playing, they could maybe say I hop on the Xbox. My friend is over here playing his Xbox. He's playing Call of Duty, but I'm not allowed to play Call of Duty. But I could still chat with him, whether or not he's playing Call of Duty. We can just both be chatting like a phone call on the Xbox. So you don't even have to be in the game. So if you're like, hey, I don't like how you've been talking to your friends on Fortnite, no more Fortnite, you take the disc away. Actually, I don't even know if there's such thing as a Fortnite disc. You just download Fortnite. So say you take away the Call of Duty disc because you're like, no more of that. They can still get on there and chat with their friend. They don't have to be playing the game. So I just wanted you to know that. And that goes for anything like Nintendo Switch, Xbox 360, PS4, PS5. And I have a PS5 where there is a 2-way microphone built into the controller. And I didn't even know that because I don't play Fortnite. I don't play Call of Duty. I don't chat, with 12-year-olds when I'm playing online. I just want to play a game by myself, like a puzzle game or a card game, and or a basketball game, but I don't want to play against anybody. And I didn't know that there was somebody talking to me through my controller. So I was playing NBA 2K online. This was at some point last year. And some guy just saying, hey, you're trash. You're terrible at this game. And like through my controller. And I was like, what? How do I stop this? And then I realized he could hear me saying, what's going on? And so I felt really old when that happened. And I thought, wow, I knew everything about the PS5 because I wanted to use it and play it. But I didn't know that people were going to talk to me. There's a speaker in the controller speaking to me. And then I was speaking back through it. And then there was a button that I didn't know what it did. And boom, I just muted myself. So at least he couldn't hear me trying to figure out what was going on anymore. But I could still hear him saying annoying things. So we're all learning all the time. And one more thing before moving on, just to talk about some unfun things real quick. There's going to be a twist later on that has to do with porn and video games later on. So just stay tuned with that. I'm just priming your brains. All right. Now, the third thing to know where they are going digitally. There's a lot of stuff out there, as you know. Streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, Spotify. I love Spotify myself. I can't imagine someone else choosing a song that I would listen to, like how the radio used to do for so long, and how playlists do. I'm like, I don't do that. I click exactly what playlist or song that I want to listen to, and I'm probably weird with that, but it's amazing. I don't have to change CDs. I still remember that. So You don't need to really know every single song that's on Spotify, right? You don't need to know every single video that's on YouTube. It's literally impossible. You don't need to know every show that's on Hulu or Netflix, right? But there are a couple things I would encourage you to consider. Know how to track what your kids are doing, what they're watching on the apps, what they're reading on the internet, what they're listening to on Spotify, what sites they're visiting, that kind of stuff. These things are fairly accessibly done. You can find what your kid just watched on Netflix. I mean, we've all used Netflix before. It says recently watched, and like one of the few first things you're on there. So that's great accountability for any family. You know, if you told your kids not to watch Kevin Hart's new comedy because there's a bunch of cussing in it, and you see recently watched and it's halfway watched, you know, you're gonna have to have a conversation. And it could be something worse than that. So it's always good to check in on stuff like that. And really any app will have this feature to a degree. Kids know how to get around it, but I can talk to you about that as well. Also, let your kids know that you will be checking in on what they are reading, watching, listening to, what sites they're visiting, all that stuff. And opinions will vary on how intense you want to be snooping on your kids, I guess. But the reality is, and you guys know this, you purchased the device, you purchased the streaming service, or maybe it was grandma, you know, you have the internet connection at your house that they're using, and you definitely reserve the right to check on how it's being used, and you should. You really should. So at the same time, I encourage you not to think control as much as accountability. The next thing here is just to know what's popular or what's trending. And like I said earlier, when I first found out about Fortnite, I think it was around 2017, 2018 maybe, Fortnite became overnight sensation in youth groups. And I thought, well, this is not a game that I like. I like games that are different than this and whatever, and this is gonna be popular like most trendy things, and then it's gonna lose its popularity. Well, it's almost as popular as Minecraft now. You guys probably already know about Minecraft as well. But it's its own economy. They have like Justin Bieber concerts like in Fortnite. You log into Fortnite, you put on your headphones, you go watch the little Justin Bieber animated avatar play all of his songs. It's the craziest thing ever. There's a ton of transactions within the game. If your kids play Fortnite, they've probably asked you for V-Bucks. They want to buy stuff in the game to make themselves look cooler in the game. And what's crazy is these aren't even upgrades to make your character better or make your weapons stronger or anything. It just literally changes how you look. And that is a huge, huge economy of kids just wanting to buy stuff that makes them look like John Wick. I think John Wick is one of the more popular avatars. And you're just not cool if you have like a default Fortnite avatar, you don't look cool. So that's very crazy. But if you're aware of these things, if you're aware of like what's popular in teen culture, it's gonna help you a lot as a parent. Around middle school age, kids start to look to their peers for identity, which means if something is popular among kids they hang out with, you better believe that they will at least be intrigued by it. Now, they might not want to watch the vampire show, but the teen vampire show, or whatever it may be, they may think, yeah, that's dumb, and my dad says it's dumb so much that I wouldn't possibly watch it because he's just going to roast me if I do. They're still intrigued. They still want to know what's going on so they can be relevant at school. And if you want to know what is relevant, and you do find out and you are able to talk to your kids about it, then they're going to you're going to be able to have that conversation, that connection with them, and you're going to build a little bit more relational equity on why, as a parent, you should be listened to. You're going to have better reasons why this is worth avoiding. If you know that this particular show has really unhealthy views about certain things, or really unhealthy things portrayed, or just really strong language that you don't want to be used in your house or for your kids to hear at all, if you know exactly what it is, then you can say, hey, I know what's in this and I don't want you to do it because of this. They're going to respect that a lot more than because I said so, which you can say so, you're the parent. But just building that connection as to why they like it, that kind of stuff is going to be super helpful. So here's an example, something that your kids may have watched that may not have been healthy for them to watch, can be an opportunity for you to bring the gospel filter into engagement in the show. Whether your kids watch it or were just a part of the discussions about it, which even if they haven't watched it, they're probably going to be about the discussions of something that's very popular among teens. You would be able to kind of filter that through the gospel and say, oh, well, that's how they're portraying relationships in the show. Well, as a follower of Jesus, really in a relationship, you shouldn't do this. You should wait till marriage for this. You should do that. You're going to be able to have those conversations much easier if you really know what's going on in the show. You guys know what I mean with that. I'm going to move on. The fourth thing to know is know where to go so you can know. Okay? Now, I hope you're not too overwhelmed or annoyed or shocked by any of this stuff, and I don't think you are. You guys are pretty engaged and are good parents, and the fact that you're here or listening to this really means that you probably know that there's a lot to know and a lot to do regarding this, so great job just for being here. So here are some things, some resources to help you out. One of them is smartsocial.com. I got a little sample of what that looks like here on the screen. And this is actually not a faith-based site. Instead, their goal is to help parents and kids understand how important leaving a healthy social footprint is for teens when it comes to shaping their future education or getting a job, getting into colleges, that kind of stuff. It's very focused on social media. And there are several parent guides that explain apps really well. So really, if I try to explain an app to you, it's not going to be worth your time as much as going to smartsocial.com, clicking on TikTok, what it does, how it's used, what it can do, that kind of stuff. Another helpful site is xxxchurch.com. This site is run by Craig Gross, who founded the XXX Church. Maybe it's a church, but it's an organization that helps block pornography. It helps with accountability, porn addiction, that kind of stuff. And it gives great faith-focused advice, but it also expands a bit and covers apps, social media, websites, and devices. And again, Brian is going to have some great advice next week on what to do if your kids have already gotten into this kind of harmful content, how to get them out of that, what to do for accountability, that kind of stuff. Another one is pluggedin.com. This is from Focus on the Family, and it's pretty much a one-stop shop for parents who want to be educated on entertainment media, whether that's movies, TV games, books. I read a Hogwarts Legacy, a big game that just came out. They reviewed that game on the site and said, pretty good game, but there's maybe some stuff you wouldn't want younger kids to see. And I thought it was a pretty good review. I saw the guy who supposedly reviewed it. He looked older than my dad, and I thought, did this guy really play this game? I would have loved to see that on YouTube. But anyway, moving on. Fightthenewdrug.com. So this is a really, really great site, but this is not a Christian site. This has the best, in my opinion, the best evidence-based stats and everything about how harmful pornography can be. If you have a kid who is struggling with not wanting to be a Christian, or if your kid has recently said, hey, I'm actually an atheist, so all these reasons you're giving me for not doing these things, I'm actually disregarding because I don't care, I don't believe in God. Well, all of this stuff is technically not from a Christian perspective. So you can give your kids some whys other than just because Christians aren't supposed to. And I know that sounds crazy because we want to do things because Jesus has modeled them for us. We want to avoid things because we know they are harmful to not only our brains and our bodies, but our spiritual connection with Jesus. But if your kid doesn't agree with you on that right now in this season, this is something that you can really use to show them why it's dangerous for anyone to avoid, even if they're not a Christian. I got a slide here that I just pulled some stats off the Quick Stats page, and these are quite alarming and are backed by research from good sources. So I'm going to show you these stats right here. This should be slide 24. I actually don't have it in here, so I'm going to try to read stat 24 here, or slide 24 here. So the majority of young people are exposed to pornography by the time they're 13. Okay, I know some of y'all have kids older than that, some of y'all have kids younger than that. That doesn't mean just when they hit 13, they're going to see pornography, but I mean, it's like, I want to say it's in the high 80s of 13-year-olds have seen pornography. And then just because they're not 13 yet, doesn't mean it's impossible for them to see it. We can get into a little bit later how they can access pornography. But as you can see by some of these stats, some of these things are very serious, and a lot of these, I wouldn't say send your 12, 13, 14-year-old the link for this, have them read through how bad it is. I wouldn't send a 12, 13, 14-year-old to this site, especially if they have not already gotten into pornography, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff down here that could be triggering and talking very detailed ways about what is in pornography and and how that is effective to people negatively. So just be careful of that. And they also do mention certain porn sites by name. So if you didn't know what a name of a porn site was, and then you found out what one was, you might be curious to type that in. That's what happened to me when I was 16. I didn't know any names of any pornography sites, but then I heard a friend say one, and it stuck in my head. And then when I was at home alone at some point, I got curious and typed it in, and that was not good. So there's a quick flyby of the 4 things to know. Now, I'd like to address probably the other question here that you guys are probably still wondering is what types of filters or controls are out there. Now, you may not like this conclusion, but my conclusion is filters are not the answer. They're not going to fix everything, and here's what I mean. Firstly, there is almost always a way around the filter or around the parental controls. If somebody wants to get bad content bad enough, they can definitely find it. Secondly, no filter can 100% block out questionable, inappropriate, or graphic content. They do pretty well. I think they've probably gotten better over the last several years, but it can still find your kids. Even if you did all this stuff, it can still find them. And it can find them through their friends' phones. Some of y'all who have teens probably already know this, but Josh actually mentioned this yesterday during our parenting breakout during the marriage conference, and he was talking about how certain kids, their parents don't let them use Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it is, but then they're hanging out with their other friend who does have a phone and say, "Can I borrow your phone?" And they'll just log in on whatever app that is, and their parents have no idea that they do that. So hopefully that's not too terrifying. Most of you parents probably already had that perspective because you are parents. But yeah, they can find it in all kinds of ways. So even if it's blocked on their phone, it may not be on their friend's phone blocked. And third, there will come a day when your kid grows up, and it's going to be on them to make their own filters and their own parental controls. And if they have not learned ways to show restraint and the wisdom of why before this point, it could get really ugly really fast. So if you really lock them down and there's no way they can do anything, but you know that they're rebelling and you know that they're trying and you keep trying to battle that, at some point, that opposition that they have in you goes away. And that's probably a bad way to look at it. I mean, they're probably not just fighting you so they can sin constantly, that kind of thing. But you're raising kids to become adults eventually, and then they eventually will. Here's a story from a person who worked as a residence director at a Christian college. Okay, this is involving what I was just talking about. He said that every year in his IT department, they would show him a giant spike in the number of students visiting pornographic websites in their first weeks at college. So that kind of just goes to show when the filter is off and the curiosity is still there, or the harmful behavior cycles are still there, there's nothing to stop them at that point. I mentioned earlier when I was 16, I was exposed to hardcore pornography as a 16-year-old, and it was on the internet, of course. But 10 points to Gryffindor if you can guess what device that I was able to do this on. I hope this isn't like too much information. It's not going to be anything super weird, but I didn't have an iPad. Okay, so I'll already let you get that one out of there. So, does anyone have any guesses? My parents' computer is incorrect. A flip phone is incorrect. I want to say as a 16-year-old, I probably did try to do that on a flip phone, but I'm a changed man now. So the correct answer is a PlayStation 3. Probably wouldn't have thought that, but there is a browser on the PlayStation, the Xbox, anything Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 or Nintendo Wii, anything newer than that, there's a browser. I think the Switch even has one. The PSP. My friends, that's how they would look at pornography in high school. And so that's how I figured out, well, maybe I can do that on my PS3. Crazy. And my parents had no idea. They had no idea, and I really wish they would have known. I wish they would have done something that I would have thought was lame and, too harsh or too, sheltering or whatever it is that kids don't want, or they act like they don't want. But even as a 16, 17-year-old, I thought, this is not good for me that I'm doing this. And as an adult, I really wish that I wouldn't have been exposed, because the damage that does, it's long lasting. And so that's something I have to live with today. So I don't say that to scare you. God is way more powerful than any negative effects from this kind of stuff, and he's way more powerful than anything that the internet has. So now, even as I say all that, there's definitely a reason to put reasonable restrictions on everything that you can. Although you can't block everything, blocking some things does help and can be valuable. But really, we want to train kids to navigate a digital world on their own. And there can be space for some restrictions depending on the age of your kid. And just like the knife illustration, some things are going to be useful tools. You're going to want your kid to have a phone at some point so you can call them, so they can call you, so you can track where they're at, whatever you need to do with it. But at the same time, you don't want to upgrade the knife into a lightsaber that has 17 blades on it. Okay, so back to filters. When the internet first started, filters were all the rage, and you could download a bunch of software and set them on your computers with a bunch of restrictions and block any websites that contain certain content. And I think filters are probably even better now, but they're not 100%. You can't just turn on the filter, log in, absolve yourself of any parental responsibilities now, because now whatever blocker does it for me. That's not really going to work. So the bottom line here is there's really no magic bullet, or I guess knife, right? There's no magic knife out there that will relieve you of your responsibilities or do your work for you. And honestly, this is probably a good God-given thing, because that tension, that struggle of leading your kids through the tech world, it can ultimately help your connection with your kids. This is, honestly, you could use any of this as an excuse just to talk to your kids. You can still flex your parental authority and hey, it's time for us to have a talk. Come in here and shut the door, and because they wouldn't, otherwise want to maybe sit down and talk with you. But this is important, and they will feel like, if you're putting some things out there like, hey, I want you to be able to know these things so that when I give you more responsibility, boom, you're going to have their ears right there. When I give you more responsibility with technology, you'll know what to do. And so I think they will really respect that you want to keep them safe. And you can do that in whatever way that you choose is best for whichever kid that you apply this to. So like I said earlier, they're going to ultimately become adults on their own. You're going to have to let them make their own decisions eventually. And in order for them to ultimately agree with you, when they make their own decisions, you're going to need to be able to tell them the whys, okay? It's ultimately healthier for them to avoid certain things during certain phases of their life, but you've got to supply the why. This is my new favorite thing to say, probably because it rhymes, but it's really helpful. For example, if somebody was telling me to do something and they didn't tell me why, and it's something I had never done before or something I'd never heard of before, it'd be a lot harder for me to actually listen to them, believe them, and then follow through on it, right? So I just want to give you that today. If you're supplying the why, that's going to help you so much for your kids to know where you're coming from. I know when my parents said, because I said so, that was not good enough for me. And they would say slightly better things than that, but that wasn't good. They weren't giving me a lot of whys. And my parents they didn't shelter me too bad, but they were pretty strict and conservative in some areas. And as a kid, not knowing why they were doing that, I just thought they were just being mean to me, even though they were trying their best to keep me safe and do what's best for me. So obviously, when you're supplying the why, the biggest reasons are to honor God by avoiding sin and keeping your kids safe. The biggest why is I want to keep you safe. And if they don't know what you're keeping them safe from, you may have to explain that a little bit, but that doesn't mean you have to expose them to anything. So you want to keep your kids safe from not only sinful content, but harmful content. Sin can lead us to content that's harmful, and that harm can last for a long time. So again, thank you so much for caring about your kids enough to want to learn new things, want to learn about Fortnite or Nintendo Switch or whatever it may be. The better connection you have with your kids, the more it's going to help. It's going to help you supply the why, and it's going to help you just know what they're getting into and how to deal with them if things do come around and that they are exposed to certain things. So Before we get into Q&A questions and stuff, I just want to remind you that I don't know any good stuff about what, well, that's probably a lie. I know a few good things about what to do if your kids have gotten into harmful content. Brian is going to bring a lot of good stuff on that next week. So I can turn off the mic, or, hey guys, should we keep doing Q&A on the mic? Okay, so do we want Q&A for the YouTube is what I'm asking. All right, Q&A for the YouTube, cool. Got it. So, does anyone have any questions regarding video games, filters, internet, harmful content, anything like that? All right, I guess not. Well, if you want to ask questions that don't go onto YouTube, you can still ask me questions afterwards. I want to come around and give you guys Parent Zone QR codes to scan if you would like to be a part of the Parent Zone emails that come out every month or so. And then, obviously, you can email me anytime, ben@university.church. Same thing with Andrew at university.church. I would say that I'm probably, and Brian at university.church as well, but I would say I know the most about video games. Andrew knows the second most. Yeah. And Brian probably the third most. He mostly plays like football games. So I'm a pretty big nerd. And we're all great friends if you guys didn't know that. I would say that I know a lot about the iPhone specifically and how to remove apps, remove App Store, that kind of thing. I know we had a parent last week ask about, what if I have this great app that blocks things and my kid is smart enough to delete that app or log out of that app or whatever it is. I had a great answer that I wanted to share last week, so I'm going to share it now. What you can do is you can disable the ability to delete apps, and the way that you do that, it doesn't say in settings disable deleting apps. You have to disable the app store, and I think this is probably doable on an Android phone or a Google phone. But Android phones and Google phones, like if your kids are a little bit smarter than average, like there's even more ways to get around stuff on those, I believe. So those are going to need some Google searches for sure for me to really figure out how to help you with that. But a lot of these websites that I mentioned, they do have actual walkthroughs and guides on how to do those things. I know from firsthand experience that taking browsers off of things or locking browsers on things is really the best way to avoid anything. And then if you want to, maybe only allow your kids to browse the internet on their iPad or their laptop, when they're at your house, you can do like screen time on the phones where it says, hey mom, will you log me in so I can get an hour of internet? Sure, and that works really well. It cuts it off hard after an hour to where they cannot log in unless they have the 4-digit code, or I think some of the iPads and stuff even have like 8-digit codes now. It's kind of inconvenient. I like the 4 because whenever I log into my iPad, it's like 8 now. Anyway, so does anyone have any questions regarding like the websites or the helpful parent websites?
It's unrelated to that.
Okay.
Do you find that kids fixate on one game exclusively, or do they play a certain number of games?
Great question. Definitely a certain number of games. So if I'm talking to some J-12 students, sometimes I'll joke around and I'll say, hey, is Minecraft still cool or is only Fortnite cool now? Because they will literally, one week they're saying, Minecraft is dead, we only play Fortnite now. Or, Minecraft is the best game and Fortnite's old now. They will seriously waffle back and forth. So there's gonna be several games that kids like. They love the Zelda games, they love Minecraft, they love Fortnite, they love the Lego Indiana Jones, Lego Star Wars. Like, there's like a lot of games that kids will play. Teenagers will play Call of Duty, plenty of games. There's so many games and so many like really good quality games out there that kids do play a billion different ones. So I'm an adult who doesn't get the game that much, so I'll buy like one game a year and I do stick with games. So it's honestly hard. I'm getting so old that I can't relate to kids who play multiple games. But it is what it is. Great question. Does anyone have any more game-related questions? I feel very confident about those ones. Do you want me to show those websites again? I think some of you took pictures of those, but we can totally do that as well. I should have made like little note cards I could have passed out with those on there. Question.
Do you find like in G12, or even are you finding or seeing any patterns of like an age range where all of a sudden technology or games or social media suddenly becomes more attractive and that's what they want, or is it just kind of all over the board?
Great question. So I'm going to repeat the question for YouTube. She asked around, so J12, what we have here is 4th and 5th graders. She was asking around J12 or Kid Zone on Sundays when I'm around kids. Are there kids kind of, at what age are kids kind of gravitating towards interest in video games? It's getting younger and younger. I was subbing for a first grade leader today, just now in the 9:30 service, and one of the first grade boys in there, hey, you guys play Zelda? You guys ever play Zelda? I beat Zelda. I unlocked the glider in Zelda, saying all this stuff. And some of the kids were like, yeah, I played that. And I know this kid didn't beat Zelda. You got to be at least a 3rd grader to beat Zelda. It's like, it takes a long time, and it's a lot of stuff. And maybe he did, and kids are just advanced now. That could be a thing too. But that's a 1st grader. I know 4th and 5th graders, their culture, how they talk to each other, a lot of it is influenced by video games. I think really any elementary student is going to be around kids who are heavily influenced by video games. And the stuff that they say, the way that they trash talk each other, like the way that they, brag to each other, it's all stuff they've heard on the headset whenever they get a win in a game or whatever. And it's really kind of crazy. And the thing about that is my mom used to not give me the headphones because she's just like, I don't want you talking to those people on there. I hear you guys yelling at each other and all that stuff. Well, you can still hear what other people are saying in some games through just your TV speakers. And they don't have filters on their language and stuff that they say. And some of the worst things you can hear aren't from the game itself. It's from some 17-year-old who just practices saying mean things to people all day. And so, yeah, there's that. But to answer the quick question, I think really any elementary student is going to be, at some level, very interested in games because of how popular they are now. So, great question. Yes?
When does it go from just gaming to more of an addiction? What are the cues to look for where it's gone to take them to the next level?
Great question. So when does it go from gaming to like compulsive behavior or an addiction? Great question. Gaming is a great dopamine hit for anyone who does it at any point. I have grown up with ADHD, and I now cope without medication as an adult. Well, I guess you could say caffeine is my coffee is my medication now. But I love things like video games because they're so engaging to how my brain is wired. Really just the amount of time that kids are spending, if they're gaming every day, I don't think that's wrong necessarily, but you would want to monitor how much, how long. Are they super, super, super into it where if they have to quit, it ruins their day? At that point, you might want to look at, maybe some other ways, other sources for them to do something. But really, I think for any addiction, I heard one time, and I'm not an addiction specialist or anything, but any addiction, I heard once that if there's compulsive behavior going back to whatever they're addicted to, that is starting to lead to neglect of other things like schoolwork, relationships, things like that. That's when there's a real big red flag. If there's several missing assignments and all they want to do is play Call of Duty, then that's at that point you're going to want to probably do something, or hopefully before that point, right? That's the whole point of all this is to hopefully before that point. But yeah, and a lot of kids are high functioning game addicts, if you could put it like that. It's just so prevalent and so popular, but also some kids, they can balance it. Some kids can balance playing Fortnite like professionally for several hours a day after school, after they've already done their homework. And some kids, they cannot do that. So I guess just, getting involved in multiple things, having healthy boundaries, hey, the timer has gone off for video games. Now we're going to do something different. We're going to read or hang out as a family, that kind of thing. So really, as a parent, y'all are going to know your kids best. And so if you know that they've been doing something for a long time, and you'll kind of know when too long is or too often is. So really that's up to you. But technically the dopamine and endorphins you get from playing games or and the way that games are designed now, they're designed to be addictive. Fortnite is designed to be addictive. It is designed to addict you to buying more skins for your character. That's what they call them, the skins for how you look in the game. The NBA 2K series, which I play, I have a love-hate relationship. I'm actually boycotting NBA 2K23 for several reasons. I've been learning a lot about game development, and I think that they're putting out a subpar product each year. You guys don't care about that. But the way that they design certain game modes makes it to where if you log in every day, you're going to get bonuses. And if you log in every day all week, on Friday, you get to spin the prize wheel and you get a prize. And then if you're not doing this, it's going to be hard to power up your players and win more games. And the people who do this, you play against one of them, and tough luck. They're going to be really good. They're going to have way better players than you. And so I started as an adult, this was, I think, a couple years ago. I was playing this mode, and I was having a lot of fun. And I was like, do I really need, I get home from Wednesday night church, and I'm like, I'll go to bed, but I just got to log in to get my daily prize. And my wife's like, I get it, because on Friday you won't get to spin the wheel if not. And then I think to myself, this is ridiculous. I don't want to play, their game within the game to get me to do this thing. And if you want to skip all that routine to get the prizes, just get out the credit card, pay $20-$30, and you can download, new characters and new packs and upgrades and all that stuff. So it's really a farm of money. I know that if your credit card is hooked up to your kid's Xbox, be very careful with that, because they will start clicking buy, and if it lets them buy it, they might just keep doing it. There's several stories of, parents of elementary kids who they said, I'll buy you one Fortnite skin because you won't shut up about it. And the next thing they know, they go on their bank app and they see thousands of dollars gone, and their kid has every skin in Fortnite. Some of them cost a lot, for just something in the graphics. It doesn't even help your performance in the game. So it's a little crazy. There's a lot of things, and I've maybe said several outdated things today. I don't want to, hopefully I still sound credible and stuff. But yeah, good question. Sorry, I don't want to talk too much when you guys ask great questions. But any other questions? All right. Well, you guys can feel free to, again, email me or contact me, sign up for Parent Zones, come talk to me whenever. And I'm very open to talking about any of this stuff anytime. So you can find me at church. You can send me a text, an email, whatever. Again, thank you for coming. YouTube people, thank you for watching. We want to do more stuff like this to be able to engage you in just equipping you to be awesome parents that you guys already are. And the world's just changing. We all need help and a team to keep up with stuff. So great job. You are doing just that. And I'm going to pray, and then we can dismiss. God, I thank you so much just for these people here and the people watching online as well. Lord, just be with us to know what our kids need. Give us that knowledge. Give us that connection, that relationship with our kids in order to be able to have the authority as parents and have the relational equity that we need. Lord, guide us to protect our kids from sin and harmful things. Help us to be gracious when our kids aren't perfect. And Lord, again, I just thank you again for this opportunity that we have in this church, in this country, to be able to have this conversation and to be able to get better at these things. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Thanks, y'all.